Well, hey everybody, thanks for joining for another office hours. We're on our June office hours. Been doing these for a little bit now. And this time it's just Evan and I. Next time we'll have a bit of a special guest. We'll talk about that at the end because we're doing something pretty exciting. We're building up to a lot this year, and this is actually a super topical office hours. If anyone here attended the last one, I'm going to recap a little bit of it, but the gist is that we chose this month's subject because we're talking about assessments, as we'll see in a sec. And we're talking about what we're doing with like our whole strategy. We talked about planner last month and how that kind of fits in. We have a bigger kind of goal that we hope to hit by the end of the year that hopefully will become a little bit more clear as we go through our office hours. So let's get started with the preamble of stuff that people don't really need to know, but I still got to say it. What are office hours? If you've not done this before, obviously it's a place to learn what's going on at Cloud Radial. It's best practices. So a lot of times people here have good suggestions. Sometimes people don't even really know how to use some of the features that we talk about or some use cases. So we run through those. Obviously, place to share some thoughts. If you have anything to say to us, to your fellow peers about how they use stuff, what they like, dislike, fair game. And then generally speaking, this is, if you couldn't tell, a little informal compared to something where I try to pitch a thing to you. No need for that. We're just chit-chatting back and forth. And again, we download the chat, we download the Q&A. So if we don't specifically answer something, if you're watching this recorded, didn't get to it, no big deal. We comb through it and we get back to you guys individually. So don't feel too scorned if we don't hit you up. All right, let's get a quick recap of last month, which was, again, specifically focused on a lot of the planner stuff we're doing. So we took a lot of good feature suggestions from our planner. We're doing some upcoming changes. We got some stuff to show in relation to that this month, partially because of some of the comments and whatnot, and then partially because we've been working on it for a while, so we want to start actually showing some things. And I want to start off by just briefly covering a little bit of the update that came out pretty late last month. So big quick recap, we talked a little bit about this, is started a new program for Rick's Picks, which basically is, to be very brief, we have a lot of feature requests, and typically the way we do it, and Evan can talk about this a little bit as well, is we rank them with kind of a matrix of how many votes do they have, what's the impact, what's the, the benefit to everybody. We just look at a lot of different features. We try not to just pick ones that people just bring 80 of their friends and vote on, because otherwise, what about the little guys that have good ideas? What happens to that? So Rick's Picks were designed to be something that we can pick something that we believe is viable, reasonable, pretty easy to get out the door. We work on that and we try to slip it in addition to major features, bug fixes, all that stuff. This is not overriding any of the other stuff. We're trying to speed up some development stuff there. So is that fair to say, Evan? I mean, Evan's actually the guy who helps comb through that and figure it all out. When Rick's Picks, is there any magic to that organization process when you look at feature requests?
Well, I'd like to think that when you make a decision on something, that our customers probably want that too. So a lot of times we're looking for kind of things in that nobody's asking for it, few people are asking for it, or a lot of times internally we have some experiences that can convince us to do a thing or make something. Basically, Ricky will figure it out one way or another, and yeah. So honestly, I don't think there's any rules to it. It's more like your gut feelings are usually right.
Well, in the case of last month, and then we're going to actually showcase one of these. So last month we did ConnectWise ticket formatting because, again, super quick recap. We're not going to repeat all of last month's office hours. When we submit tickets from Cloud Radial, like specifically when we look at some of these guys, the way that they actually format and come through was kind of just a big block of text. So people have been asking for it for a while. I thought, hey, like years ago when we first started, there were some limitations on that. It's gotten a lot better. A lot of the major PSAs have improved the way that they receive stuff. They allow for some formatting, sometimes even rich text. So we just cleaned that up. And that was largely the plan. So we fixed that. We made ConnectWise, which is the largest majority of our partners connect to ConnectWise. So figuring that out made it a little bit more legible. We're doing the same. We're going through and figuring that out for other ones. Again, I'll talk about that as well. But this office hours, I want to talk about this. This was a continuation and something that ties into all of our stuff, which is the add to planner automation activity. And really, it's going to be kind of, you'll see it kind of coalesce. We're talking about planner in relation to assessments, in relation to alignment and policies, and kind of how we're tying all those features together and where we're going as a company with all that stuff. So pretty interesting if you're more interested in the kind of more VCIO reporting direction. And if you're not, if you still kind of come to Cloud Radio and rely on it for ticketing and whatnot, super killer flexibility there. And we're going to showcase and demo and walk through some of the ideas that that we have that work pretty cool as examples of things you can do really soon. This feature's not out yet. You're going to see it demoed here. It's turned on behind like a feature flag for us. Seeing it right now, Evan and I literally were like, seems pretty ready to me. So you'll probably see that sooner than later, I would guess. And then, yeah, so not super crazy because again, we've been working on some stuff and we'll talk about that as well. We've been hitting summer is always a really busy thing for pretty much all vendors just because there's a lot of conferences out there. We just got back from PAX 8 in Denver, which was great for us. I'll talk about what we talked about there, which is storefront, but you'll see what that means. And then I was just in Dublin for DattoCon, and that was also awesome. We talked about Portal 365, which is our kind of simplified cut down version of the classic Cloud Radio CSA, $95 a month. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So in the meantime, let's just jump back to my boring PowerPoint and cover through so we can get to the cool stuff. And actually, I think before I get into my stuff, which I want to talk about those Rick's picks and I want to showcase that add to planner automation activity, I'd like Evan to take a moment and showcase the planner quarters that we were talking about last month, and maybe you can tee that up. If not, I'll remind our fine folk about what we were talking about with the quarter expansion. Do you have that ready to go, or do you want me to?
Yeah, me. I do.
So take over then, man. What are we doing?
Go ahead and share my screen.
We've done this like 40 times. You know that.
Yeah, but I got a new computer. You know how Zoom likes to act with, or any thing likes to act with a new machine. So
I do love how we've all done Zoom a million times. You're like, where is it? It's like, it's the big green one that says share screen.
So the cool thing about this is every screen preview is black. So I'll just guess at which screen I'm sharing, and you guys can tell me.
See, as long as it's not your online dating profile.
Am I sharing the right screen?
We'll see. Just says black screen. Haven't started screen sharing.
This is your screen sharing, and it's black.
I'm going to guess for you that you didn't give it permissions because he does have a new computer. So instead of fumbling, I'll pick it up.
Let's go ahead and just you share.
All right. Sounds good. Back to me, baby.
But I can talk.
All right. You talk.
And basically, what you're going to want to do is impersonate me in the demo account.
There we go. Can you see me okay?
Yep.
Nice.
And then it just told me Zoom ended unexpectedly, but I'm still here, right?
I see you.
Okay. New computers, whatever. So yeah, go ahead. You're impersonating me already?
Yeah. And I want to flip back. So I want to set this up and then I'll let you talk about it just because I think it's easier. So if you have Cloud Radio right now and use the planner, what we're talking about, what we talked about last time was, and I'll check the chat and make sure this isn't freaking out. You got zoomed. You're all getting zoomed, bro.
I'm getting zoomed out.
Zoomed out. All right. So here's the current planner as it stands. We talked about this last month, just saying like, hey, a big limitation of the planner is you can't really go forward too much. You can't really go back. Actually, you can't go back at all, which means that what happens when you want to expand the planner, you want to do this multi-year thing. We've had this request forever, but try to figure out a way that actually makes it scale because the big vision, and this is maybe you can talk about this, Evan, I'll monopolize otherwise, is to get more integrated with opportunities and projects and so on and so forth. So this is what the way it is right now. This is why we had to do all this zooming around, is because his thing looks like that. See this thing? This didn't exist. Doesn't exist for most people, actually. So tell us why.
Am I the only one now that's Ricky's screen doesn't seem to be on the planner?
Oh no, what's it on? Am I getting zoomed? Currently zooming?
It was on the home page. Oh, okay. So it is me. I'm totally in the dark.
This happens 3 more times, then we'll literally get fired on screen. So
okay, good. Everyone else saw, yeah. Everyone else, I can do this with my eyes closed. We're good. Okay, so actually
we're gonna guess Evan's got a gremlin, so I'll just talk over it. If it doesn't come back in 5 seconds. Okay, me it is. All right. So what we're talking about here is we've got our quarter mover. Now it's not super complex. Again, we're still working on hashing this out, but the gist is that see it shifts over. So what's happening is we're actually going past Q1 of the current year, Q2 of the current year. So this will go on infinitely, I believe. Are you back, Evan? Are you back from Earth?
I think so. Zoom does, my computer does not like Zoom. I don't know if I'm getting, anyways, yeah. So if you go ahead and you can go left and right, you go ahead and click add, you can see the options. The whole idea was we took what you guys kind of said in the polls, which was almost like everyone was undecided. So we said, okay, well, you're going to have both options, the old option, and you're going to be able to select dates if you want to. You know, you can change these, but basically the idea is to start. We wanted to just give you that expanded timeline. We also added some other feature requests in there. You'll see them in development. So if you're curious as to what they are, this is just kind of the first step into getting the planner to be more open and customizable. The idea being really to be able to track things when they're accomplished and show what you want to show when you want to show it. So this is kind of the first step into this, into making the planner more expandable and more, you know, view savvy and end user savvy.
Right. Yeah. And again, what we talked about last month was that we know the gist of what people want to use Planner for. And we know that like the power in it would be theoretically pulling in dates from primarily the PSA. We've done a bunch of polls on that, like where people do their project management, but who knows? Like maybe in the future you want to use something else and you don't want to be limited by the PSAs and what they have available. So it's like, if it's like what ConnectWise projects, whatever, maybe, right? But other times it might be like, what if you want to swap to like Jira or something like that that has an API? So that question that we asked last time going, do you want to do scheduled quarters, which is like your more or less is like more or less we'll do it Q1 next year. Cool. The project dates allow us to specifically do stuff, right? Now, this is going to open up a lot of possibilities down the line of like, is it going to stretch out? This is where we're still figuring out, like, do we use the big G Gantt word? Who knows, right? But somewhere in between that, we want to allow that flexibility because the more openness we have, the more we can input and grab from other sources. That was why this is a pretty cool thing to see. So again, besides the swapping to stuff, snapping back to today and moving back and forth, that's the gist.
Yeah, so James is asking, I'm not 100% sure, but I think he's asking about the state of the planner. This is something you guys don't have access to. So the planner is still working as normal.
That's right. This is why all the janky jank is because I have to impersonate Evan and he's whitelisted in a specific backend controls. And even then, this stuff's not working perfectly because again, it's like half in preview, half not for him. But this is coming out. We're still working on some stuff. So for James, still in progress, coming out not that long from now. I think a couple weeks is our estimated time for actual release for it.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it in early July at the latest.
Yeah. And again, should tie into our API conversation, which we're going to have in a minute. But for the most part, just taking a look at this. Now, in addition to this, I'll close out of your preview here and I'll go back to the gist of what I was talking about back in that Rick's pick. So again, for those that are VCIO / some kind of account management minded, the challenge has always been like, we have a general flow of Cloud Radial where it's like you grab some data, you throw it down in the planner, and then like, as we'll see, your assessments can fill some stuff out. There's some manual action there. Then there's the policies and like, what's the story we're really trying to tell all together? Now, the Rick's pick of last month, or a couple months ago actually, was to use a new automation activity for add to planner. And I'll talk about why we did that. One of the feature requests that we got that I was like, that's really interesting was, can I, from one of the tickets, right? One of the service request areas up here, can I get people to add stuff to the planner, right? The same way they can fire off a ticket, can they use that to go there? Could have made a toggle button that just says like, yeah, also add this as a planner card, but there's a lot more power that we could do behind the automation. And just so we don't ignore it, last month we also talked about the two things coming up are still our auto task formatting the tickets, just like we did for ConnectWise. And then we're showing some contracts. So we're still working on that, but we got waylaid on some other stuff that came up. So still hammering down those things. But let's talk about that use case, because just like we saw, we now have the ability, we will soon have the ability to plan infinitely in whichever direction. And then we thought, well, again, Cloud Radial's bread and butter is client interaction. So how can we get a client to interact nicely? That's one way to get their stuff put on the planner easily if they don't necessarily live in the planner, because we know most of the customers, if they don't at least live here most of the time, they certainly use this area much more than they use the planner. And then last but not least, you go, well, how can I also make it so that gets alerted, right? We've had the question come up a long time. If somebody does add, I'm the wrong person now. No, I'm the right person. If somebody does add a planner card somewhere, does it actually alert people? Does it actually send them an email? Does it do anything that lets them know, like, hey, the planner card's been added? And the answer's been like, it could, but we never did it. So like what we did this time, my collaborator decides to cooperate with me, is we've decided to basically bum the routing options off of our tickets to alert. And I'll show you how that works too. So the gist is, in any one of these, this is irrelevant to the planner cards, irrelevant to automations, just in general. When you have a ticket, we know that it sends a ticket off to a certain board with a certain queue, priority, whatever. And you can do stuff with it, right? You can do webhooks and whatnot. This thing is what people are actually after, funny enough, right? Because again, the concept was when someone submits a ticket and maybe you want your account management team to know, maybe you want your sales team to know or whatever, besides the ticket coming through, how do they get that notification? They can do it here, which is cool. But again, the flow of create a ticket, maybe, add to planner, maybe, and then notify me, how does that all work? Well, let's look at the automation of it. So we go down to the automations. What we're working with is, again, new one. This isn't visible to anyone, I don't think, except for me, is this add to planner thing. So what happens is we add the add to planner. Problem. Look at all my problems. We do our add to planner. You pre-select our category of whatever is happening, right? So our compliance, productivity, the usual stuff, just to keep it business focused. You can give it a title already ahead of time. So if you want to predefine what the planner card's going to be, knock yourself out, right? Which a lot of times you're going to want, and you're going to see a use case of me that I pre-prepared one with Evan right before this. Again, this is just the literal fields that create the planner card. So an example of one, so we don't have to come up with a brand new one, is let's say you want to create an automation for, like, literally you want to make a button for them saying like, I want to talk about the budget, right? Or I want to discuss a refresh, a migration. And they may want to, again, familiarity is the best way to get people to do stuff. They may want to do that through the ticket. So what you would do is you'd go build an automation, which we did here, right? So this case is literally an automation for IT budget review, planner card for IT budgeting on the roadmap. All right, what's happening? I did just that one thing, and then it's not going to work because they want me to struggle in the webinar. They want me to do this, and I won't. I'll keep refreshing until it works. I swear to God, you'll watch. But if I don't get to it, I'll talk about it anyways. Hey, Evan, do you think we should demo in demo environments? Probably not, right?
I think we should, you know how I felt before we had this. We should record what we're looking to show.
Practice is for suckers, everybody. I said it first. All right, anyways, so here's our planner item stuff. It's literally, I'm giving that example of like a budget review. Okay, put a description, whatever you want. Now, what I'm doing to give a little bit more flavor, and this is something that Evan and I discussed would be kind of interesting, is you could just literally have Evan submits a ticket, it creates a planner card. But what I'm doing is I'm invoking some tokens. So they're going to pull some variables from the questions, and I'll walk you through all that. But what I'm doing is I gave a generic description, and then I literally have fields within the body of the planner card, as we'll see, that say it's suggested by X person, was on this date, additional comments, whatever, let your mind run free and you'll see why I mean that. So we have this generic automation kind of running here. So what's happening there? So once I create by automation, which I already did, I'm going to go to an actual ticket, right? And most commonly, this is going to be done during those service requests, the visual things, because those are where most people kind of expect those orders, those VCIOs things. So let's take a look at like this guy down here, the schedule IT strategy review. Now, again, you could literally create a button saying, give me a roadmap review, but we could make it even more generic than that if we want to. If I reverse engineer what I'm doing here, again, end user experiences, they go here and they click on, when do you want to meet? What's up? Comments, right? Fine. What happened with it is I already appended the automation to it, as we're going to see. And then what's happening is, right, my automation for VCIO budget review, the tokens, so those variables that I defined in that automation are looking for the answers in the questions. So when someone types in, when do you want to meet? This suggested date thing is going to fill out the planner card description, right? So again, this is what I'm saying. You could go buck wild because you could put whatever you want in that planner card based on their answer. So the end user doesn't have to think about filling out the planner card and doing all that stuff. They shouldn't have to. It's just based on the natural language they do when submitting a ticket. So that's going to fill that out. I know I didn't do one for this one, but I did one for additional comments. So same thing. So basically what's happening is when I fill out this ticket, what should happen, see, is I should see the planner card come through. I should see the when would you like to meet filled out on that planner card, again, just as a talking point. And I can also see the comments come through in the body of that planner card. And that automation on here is what's doing all that work. In addition to that, right, as we talked about as a problem before, a lot of people have asked to be notified on when people add stuff to the planner cards. Well, if you create something super easy for them, where they go create a planner card on here, and they have that trigger, then I'm literally just saying like, hey, go email ricky@cloudradio.com, or you could also do that to a distribution, right? Account managers app, whatever. Let us know. So that way you have more than one notification. I have this going full force. The way I have it set up right now, this thing is going to create a ticket and it's going to notify, but I could wipe these fields and just have it notify. It doesn't need to create a ticket necessarily. So this is just me literally just leaking use cases all over the place, but it doesn't have to be like this. But for the sake of argument. So now back to the user view, we saw some of the mechanics. The end user experience is literally, I want to schedule a thing. I want to meet, I don't know, 21st. I want to plan IT budget. Cool. And then additional comments would just be like, hey, we're moving stuff to the cloud and want to see how bad our wallet's going to hurt. Nice. That seems realistic, right? Submit. So again, ticket creation, email fire off, planner card firing off. So all those things should be happening simultaneously. I'll pop up my email at some point on this other screen. There we go. So ticket submitted, right? I already got it immediately, my email. So we should see the support ticket has gone through in here. That's normal. That's what the tickets do by default. The email I got over here lets me know, because it went to me, that, hey, somebody wants to plan IT budget for 2025, right? It came from Ricky. Unfortunately, this doesn't look very impressive because it came from me to me, but you would be able to see which customer it came from and any kind of details and stuff that comes through. So fairly simple, but at least you get notified that they created a planner card. And then when we actually go back down to the planner, what happened is that card exists here. Nice, right? And we've defined the title, the body. You can also let them do it, although we already know as a best practice, like making the client do less is probably better. But at the very least, if I see that thing come up, I know the planner card's been added because I got notified. When I click on it, what should happen is, hey, the description requested by the user, me, requested by this date, right? The 21st, that's the Friday I recommended it, and then all the additional comments. So pretty simple use case, but realistically, do whatever, right? So if you're trying to get people to engage and add stuff easier in their behavior as well, I don't really use a lot of the Cloud Radial stuff, but I do use those planner card or the service requests. This is a much easier way to get them in the habit of doing it, because when you do eventually go back and then have the conversation with them and do any kind of review and using the planner, it's nice for them to see like, oh yeah, the thing that I posted, submitted, it made its way down there. So people are more likely to do that probably than to go here and type all these fields freehand, which we know that takes a lot of effort because it's a lot of fields for them. So that's why this was a big deal feature for us, because we know that just like the quarterly moving across stuff, this is going to open up a lot of doors for automations, right? Capabilities from third-party systems, capabilities for things to interact. So we are strategically picking kind of these more open-ended ways to approach these solutions rather than just adding a toggle saying, make this a planner card or move my planner card to the next year, because we want to be able to integrate with more stuff and have that be more dynamic.
Yeah, and I think it also solves that. There's like an unsung problem, or a problem that I don't think anyone's really written it down, but it's, well, I don't want them to edit it. I just want them to be able to add things to it. And you couldn't add anything to the planner without being able to edit before. So now this is a great way, again, of keeping it simple for them while giving them the power to suggest things, but then, you still have the power over the planner. You can give them read-only access if you want to do.
Right. Yeah, so that's my kind of brief demo of the Rick's pick of last month. But again, we hope to see this kind of get some good usage. And again, we want to use that automation stuff, right? We have that automation engine built into Cloud Radio that has kind of limited use cases and keeps getting more and more use cases built out. So we're doing more stuff with Datto, right? Datto quick jobs being able to run. There's a whole thing we're trying to figure out right now to make sure that people can actually run software stuff specifically on their devices. So like being able to auto select it and matching the right people to the right devices automatically. And like, all the other stuff that we saw, the webhook, send email, you can do a lot of the stuff that I even showed just playing with automations. But again, we're trying to build more of a freedom sandbox. So those that really want to get into it can, and those that really just want to click drag and drop and click OK, they can do that too. So more on that as we progress, I'm sure on the Rick's picks on the office hours, you'll see more use cases, but for right now, that's some of the strategy to it. So back to it. And again, auto task stuff coming up soon. So with that being said, let's talk about what we're actually supposed to talk about, which is assessments. And assessments are, should we say, contentious? Because there's a lot of stuff that, we have a lot of feature requests for assessments. There's a lot of stuff that we need to work on for assessments in general. But I want to kind of paint the bigger picture as well to talk about, instead of just focusing on what needs to improve now, like I want your input on what we're trying to do and what you guys would think would be best for the future. So Evan, you've launched polls before. Can you launch poll number 1, please? There's a quick poll here. So this is a general question about assessments as it stands. If you haven't used assessments, don't bother. You can probably just click out. I don't know if I made this one a requirement. But if you have used assessments, please answer this fairly, whatever, right? Because we're basically trying to figure out, before I get into it, if you have used assessments and you've stopped using assessments, or you continue to use assessments, but something's not really to your liking, which one of those things is the one that you're like, this is the number one, right? There may be maybe all of them, but what's the top one for that? Because that's the ones I hear all the time. So selfishly, I was like, drop that in a poll. Let's move on. While you guys do that, and at least for the sake of recording, let me talk about assessments in general. Let's just talk about how they work today. So that way people know, and for recording's sake, people understand how they are supposed to work. So let's get back into assessments. So assessments is a component of our, again, VCIO account management strategy. They exist down under compliance. They have their own little tab, assessments. And I'll give the high level and then some nitty gritty. So high level, they're pains in the butt. I was going to say the bad one, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear. I swear all the time. We'll see. They're pains in the butt because they're manual, right? And manual assessments, like that's not a fact of Cloud Radio. That's just kind of how things work in general. Assessments, because they can be super, super granular and because they can be made up of your fancy and whimsy, that's ultimately what people want. They want them to be manual. You want to have full control over the questions, the categories, the options, and how much those are scored. This is true of any assessment tool. Again, not a Cloud Radio specific thing. That's really awesome for hyper detailed stuff. If you're my compliance gang, great. But if you're also just trying to get, some basic questions across the board, we know it swings kind of both ways between like not enough, too much UI stuff. Does it do this? Can it do this? Again, we're going to focus on what it does right now. So super quick recap. There's a lot of documentation on this, but you're watching me do it. The way that assessments work in general is you've got templates of questions, right? Bundles of questions, and you put them into an assessment container. So the idea is that if you have like the 2 sample ones we have here, NIST and onboarding, let's just use onboarding because it's non-technical and it probably presents a little better. There could be a ton of questions in your onboarding assessment, right? And the onboarding assessment could have, let's do 100 view, could have, when you first look at a new client, some backup stuff, some documentation, some blah, blah, blah. I mean, you can literally just read this over my shoulder. UPS devices documented. Is there a good speed? Do they have a backup? Internet circuit, all that kind of stuff, right? Fine. Now, the thought process in Cloud Radio is maybe this is relevant to everyone all the time. You have an assessment bundle with 177, you can see it down bottom, questions in one assessment, knock yourself out. Cool. But sometimes you realize that like, hey, maybe I have an entire thing on the network and this company doesn't really do that. Like they don't have cloud anything. They don't have switches to manage. They may be entire chunks that are irrelevant. So it becomes a question of preference, of best practices. Actually, I flipped that back on you. Do you care to mark not applicable 50 times on a question or on a set of questions on 177 long form? That's fine. You can do that. Or if you prefer, do you just omit that entirely and skip the process of having to do that? So when it comes to our concept of throwing templates out there, that's ultimately up to you. Now, both of the demo ones just go with the carpet bomb strategy of like, here's the assessment, big fat assessment. The more you do though, right, you could say like, well, this is just the standard onboarding assessment questions. Then you want to split that out into a separate template of like just your networking stuff or just your cloud stuff or just your this, just your that. You can modularize it. So this is one of the first questions that I ask in the what is the issue with Cloud Radial, right? With some people like that. Some people like the fact that they can split them apart, but it can be kind of hairy because if you get into super technical stuff, what often happens is like if we look at the NIST one, right? You may find yourself splitting something apart 80 different ways. And when it has 106 items, and then all of a sudden you have 80 separate packages to manage, you can have a lot of things to drag and drop. So we do have the capability to rework that, right? And that's why one of the options on that thing is the content management component of it. I think a lot of people enjoy that, but then the logistics of it can be clunky. But for the sake of argument, right? Just so you guys know, that's the approach. You either have everything in one bundle or you have lots of little bundles. When you actually want to put them into an assessment, you're not actually running from templates, you're starting from here. So when you create an assessment from scratch, starting to give it, this is what we call colloquially our assessment container, right? So when I come in and I say like test or webinar, whatever, throw a test in there, there's some flavored things there, right? Do you want this to be hidden? So little orange gear denotes that it's only visible to you. So you're using it as basically a private assessment on that company. Client visible means the client go in and check it whenever they want. And then some general things. Now, right off the bat, we know there's a lot of things we can do to automate, which is why we have these drop-down triggers. A lot of times we have triggers in Cloud Radial like this that don't automate anything. That's not because we were just like, whoops, we forgot. It's because we didn't have any plans to do anything for it at the time. But like the planner, we know that later down the line, our ultimate goal is to automate this stuff. So the more triggers I build ahead of time, the easier it is later. So a lot of times when you see this, like, does it matter? It says in progress. Like, yeah, it'll say it, but we want to be able to have things that operate those switches. So anyways, so this is a test assessment. I'll just do, it's just a one-timer. Cool. I built a frame. So this is what gets kind of confusing for a lot of people is they go like, I'm ready. They're like, well, you haven't actually added any questions. So what we're going to do is we click on our little dots and we add templates. And this is Ricky's recommended way to just get going really quickly. So depending on, do you have 80 of those chunklets of questions or do you just have one big boy? In this case, I'm like, I just want the one big boy. But for flexibility, you might want to have a really tiny one and you want to multiply it once for each endpoint being the ones you've loaded up in Cloud Radial with our agent or for each server, for each user. So this is why it gets confusing for a lot of people because sometimes it's super simple. I have an onboarding assessment for one thing. Stop talking and hit go, man. And other times you've got compliance people that go like, wait a minute, I need to double check 8 things per user. So I have a per user thing, import for each user. It's going to make you a huge thing, right? 10 users in there, times 8, 80 question assessment in 2 seconds. It can be like that, right? We have a lot of complex requirements from some partners, which is why all these extra options. But sake of demo, one big chunk of questions, one timer, we're done. So what's happening now is red bar goes in, it's siphoning all that stuff and loading it in there and letting me import all the questions into our webinar test. I could go into it, it did it, there it goes, ta-da. But I already have some of the ones that have data and you don't have to watch me click a bunch of stuff. So I'll just use this one as an example. When I reverse engineer it, I actually put effort into this once I put whatnot, texts. You can see all that stuff is in there. So cool. Now, there's also other stuff you can do up top that doesn't get talked about a whole lot, and we have plans for this as well in the future. So when we talk about our bigger goal, and I will refer you back to here, we're not focused super deep on assessments. I mean, we are for the sake of this demo, but I want to keep your mind open that what I'm really after is alignment. And alignment is a mixture of how do you get assessments and our more automatic stuff to tell a story. Says, how far is someone off a baseline? Like, is this big red thing important because backup configurations are no good? Or is it because they're off a baseline and some of this stuff is super critical? And then that's going to be a problem financially, a problem to manage. There's a lot of questions there. So keep this in mind that I'm not just focused on assessments here. But when I talk about stuff like reporting, there's obviously going to be the need for people to show some reports. So you can customize like kind of like a summary report of what this assessment's looking for. Give people some context of what you're grading them on. So You can templatize some of the stuff. I'll show you that in a little bit as well, and also give them some flavor to it. But for the sake of argument, again, all I'm showing you here is that when I add a template of questions in there, they're in there. That's it. So I've done that. Now, when you actually go into one, you can run it, right? We have an attempt. We call our attempts runs. And the reason that we do it this way is because when we click on it, and I've done a run, I've done several, is we want the attempts to be logged. Again, best practices for compliance, irrelevant of Cloud Radial, is that you have separate runs of stuff, because if somebody wants to go through, some auditor wants to be like, how do they do this month versus this month versus this month versus this day? They have to be separate and independent. We catch a lot of flack because our assessments are basically orphaned, meaning that they don't listen to content. They are an exception to a lot of Cloud Radial's rules, because you get in a lot of crap if your assessments change every time you modify something from the template. If you do that, then they're not accurate anymore, are they? Then all of a sudden they become irrelevant because you keep changing things at the top end. So if I change my onboarding questions today, I can't have the one from 6 months ago change, because then you're measuring something different. That's the pain in the ass for a lot of people. Oh, I said ass. I'm allowed that one.
I
PG-13.
think that phrase is like, it doesn't count.
Okay, good. So when we look at an individual thing for like an onboarding assessment, right, this is the individual run, right? It gives you the dashboard summary view. It gives you the details. A lot of times the assessment, people are looking for this. And like, I've heard this before as well. Fair complaint, because I have this problem too. A lot of times getting to the meat of the assessment is a lot of clicks, right? You saw, like, just to get this, and I'll put myself on blast in my own webinar. Probably shouldn't do that. But, you know, you get into a assessment, you go to the onboarding one, you click it, you're in the container. You have the separate runs, you click the separate run, cool. Maybe this is acceptable if you're a client, but as the MSP manager, we know that to get to actually start grading and doing stuff, it's like 4 or 5 clicks, which is a lot. But
I'm not gonna click at it.
right. So when we actually get into this stuff, it's like, how do I actually start answering things? Again, assessments have a lot of power to them. The problem is, potentially, or the solution, depending on how you look at it, that there is that much power. So if I want to go start looking at, you know, yes, no, see up here, I did a quick response. A lot of times people are looking for this. I want to swap a yes to a no, and yes to a maybe, or not applicable, whatever, right? Just start going through that. Maybe I want to start dropping notes and stuff in there, saving the notes, whatever. They suck because they require a lot of attention, again, irrespective of Cloud Radial. Now, that's why another one of those questions on that poll is the UI UX a big problem? Because I'm pretty confident in saying, and I've done my homework on other assessment tools, I'm aware that there are ones that operate smoother, but I don't see a lot of stuff in here that I'm completely missing, as far as like, it doesn't track compliance, it doesn't track, you know, in between scores of all that other stuff. I have a poll question closer to the end saying, if you start thinking about this now, if there is a feature or a set of features that you think that there is a big critical missing piece, let us know, because obviously we're after improving that. But for now, I'm just saying, a lot of the stuff that you're probably looking for exists in here. It just may be a little bit buried, maybe, right? I want to hear your thoughts on it. So as people go through all this stuff, there's a lot of potentials to them. And if you really got to go ultra deep, this is for my people out there that have compliance issues out the wazoo, and it's not good enough to go, yep, good. They have to go into each individual questions, maybe start clicking in on like, hey, I need to submit tickets. So now you're like running remediation against these assessments. And if you edit individual stuff, like you can go throw notes, you can go throw your private notes, you can flag something so it shows up, you can start throwing attachments behind it. So these things can get way more complex because they're as complex as you need them to be. Like, do you need to throw a bunch of notes on stuff? Do you need somewhere to keep them safely? Do you need to change the format options on the fly or make it a freehand text field, right? So there's a lot of potential options to this thing, but the big focus here is that how deep you need to go scares people on assessments, because it's, again, manual. I urge you, as I said before, I'll keep doing this, alignment is the name of the game, which really means like, oh, our poll's done.
Yeah, and ended it to get
Nice.
prepared for the next one.
Cool. So our alignment question is really like, and again, I won't hold a candle to actual compliance officers that need to track all these things, but if you're like a VCIO or an account manager that is trying to summarize what the next steps for a client is trying to do, and you put yourself in their shoes, the stuff I'm showing on the screen is going to blow most people's minds, unless you're working with other compliance officers and they need to track all this other stuff. So a lot of things that I know a lot of our partners don't get into is like this stuff, where it's like, is this a preventative control question? Is it possible to happen? Is it super negligible? We start building matrices. And I'll show you how that actually comes out and changes things. So if I start saying moderate risk, a super costly thing and a very high impact, whatever you have, and you want to start inputting reference, you can in each question, and even how to fix it, right? So down to remediation stuff. Now, again, we didn't add all these fields because we thought everyone's going to have a great time filling out everything manually. We added these fields because the plan ultimately for us is to try to get someone else to do it automatically. Some AI, some third-party vendor will figure out who as things evolve, but that's why there's all these extra fields. Obviously, you can do it manually if you want to. And then the last three are just how do you want it to submit a ticket? And that's another big thing too. And we know that a lot of times the stuff that is possible from assessments, can be huge things that, migrate to the cloud is not a ticket, but at the same time, some of the smaller stuff for like onboarding is. So that stuff can be fixed pretty quickly. But when you look at just the sheer amount of detail, and that was one question. Now you got 177 more to go, 176, like, right? That's a lot. But we ultimately want to get down to our recommendations of stuff, right? So if you put numbers and costs and figures and whatnot, having some kind of a fiscal analysis to this stuff too, and down to even charting, right? So our compliant review, like we want to say like, how are things going at a whole? Cost risk analysis, I didn't put any of that stuff, but if I had put actual numbers to it, we get more of a chart. This is the stuff we're also after because we know that more serious, compliance tools, more dedicated things, they have all these high level analyses, and that's important to them. So when you look at all this stuff, coupled with the fact that you have one question being that complex and one assessment, and you go back, assessments are necessary, but they're also very scary, which is why when we talk about improving them, and I wanted to talk about them for this office hours, we are trying to get them to the point where they are less scary, definitely more automated, and then they actually mean something. So for the sake of argument, I won't go into all the other stuff assessments can do and what you can do with them, but know that you can also do this via Excel, which like most people that I've talked to take their sample stuff from other sources. That was why the other two questions were, we really only have a couple sample things. There's some more in the community that are specific to industries. So there's like some GDPR stuff, there's some CMMC stuff. A lot of times people interact with me and they say, hey, do you have an assessment on so-and-so? I go, no, because we don't have, Cloud Radio does not have a dedicated assessment creation team. We can, if that's a big barrier, but I really think, and again, based on the poll results that I saw briefly when Evan ended it, I'm not wrong. It's not really a matter of content because I think the content creators out there will give assessments. We can figure out some way to import them in. You don't have to do this stuff manually, but it is kind of a UI UX thing, it looks like, which we can improve on. You keep popping that up for me.
I just clicked share results to see what happened. I've never done that before.
I think it shares the results, which if you couldn't see, it's 50-50. So that was exactly what I thought. So very validating for me. The quality and quantity of sample assessments is not necessarily the issue. It's the UI, UX, and then the content management. We know, which good news is we have big plans to fix that. So right on the money, which is why we do these things. Let me read the chat, just make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh.
Nope, I got it taken care of. Alistair.
Good. All right. So painting the bigger picture, I'll try to wrap this up in the next 15 minutes or so to give you an idea. We know out of all those assessment things, like I said, manual stuff's a pain in the ass. How do we fix that? Can we fix that? Maybe, right? Some of the hyper-specific things that pop up, we can't do anything about, right? Again, the quintessential thing that I've seen is like, I can't automatically look for a lock on the server room unless you guys think of something super clever. Maybe we can, but for the most part, a lot of the stuff that we do capture automatically is in our policies. When we do implementation, if you've heard us talk about this before, our policies are our automation process to this. And our policies right now are, I'll say simple, even though they're not, like they can be. When you look at how this stuff works, we do our little red, yellow, green thing, but this is the stuff that is a number to a field, to a yes, no binary, and then like a maybe, right? So when I say compliance is a course certified, a course expiration, people not taking the mandatory course. Look at all these people that haven't done that, 15 people, right? That could tie to an assessment. So what we're working on is saying like, well, certainly a lot of assessments you can build, we could probably have the information for somewhere else. So can we start helping fill out your assessments and tie that stuff in as automatically as possible? The limit today of Cloud Radio's policies is that we look at mostly what stuff we can bring in, right? So when we look at the policy creation process, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to turn this whole webinar into a policy thing. is that we look at stuff that we, again, can see. So we know our domains because you hook up to it. We know the endpoints from our agents. We know very specific things on the endpoints, what AV they have, whatever. This isn't magic, right? We know exactly what fields from what thing pull into what, and then we create a rule saying, is there enough RAM? Is there enough free space available? How much is free space? And you do all that stuff. Once you set these up, this is not an assessment. This is right all the time. And as things change, this runs every day. So it lets you know every day whether things are off the alignment, right? Oh, you're getting worse, or oh, you're getting better. So as you do your work, just as their MSP taking care of things, the alignment you'll see get greener, 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 greener. And that's a good thing because you can prove your value. So can we do the same thing for assessments? We believe we can. We believe that assessments and policies is really the beginning of what we have with alignment. And again, if you can start aligning things, the missing piece that we see is what about all of the other data that we don't see, right? So we see the stuff in Cloud Radio. Well, our big plan is to pop these guys open via API. And we've talked to other vendors about this. And what we were trying to do is we're trying to set a standard for what information is critical from, I'll start name dropping vendors, right? What information is critical from Huntress or like ThreatLocker, right? They spit out a lot of stuff, but really what stuff would get us somebody out of alignment, right? Is it more or less a secure thing? So this is where when we talk to other vendors, what we're really after is what's the big picture thing that if a client has, are we good or are we not good? Kind of good. What about that, right? Getting as high level as possible and then getting as high level drill downs as possible through these policies. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to take Cloud Radial from a closed system of stuff that we look at to an open system with other vendors, open to not just vendors, like even yourselves, right? This is where the savvy MSPs will drool, because if you can write your own checks and balances and put them in Cloud Radial as our policies, not only does this present nicely, then we can tie that stuff into assessments. And then these manual pains, like the UI UX, we can fix. But the real issue is, can we fix the alignment? Can we fix that showing up? So back in my big plan here, the real thing for alignment is, can we show you, and historically too, where somebody is today versus where they want to be, where they were when you first got them to where they are now? Can you use Cloud Radial as a portal, not just for interaction and cute stuff like apps and tickets and whatnot, but to really prove the value and show that history in a way that makes sense and still doesn't drown them out? So again, we strongly believe that the assessments, which are manual, and the policies, which are automatic, the biggest missing piece on top of all that stuff, because we have things to do for both of them, is the overview area in which you need to review that stuff. So can you even get a snapshot client by client to see how is everybody doing? How are my clients doing? How's that one client doing? And kind of drill down ability. That's something we're calling the partner center, which is what we're working on. So we're trying to coalesce all this stuff to feed into each other. We do a lot of marketing stuff all over the place as far as like the different approaches and angles, but we've used a term unified client portal, which is really strong. This is what we're talking about. We're trying to take data and not just jam it and show it and get people to do things. Hurts my heart because again, as VP of product, I talk to a lot of the other vendors that say like, can we integrate with so-and-so? And the answer has become yes, but why? And it's not because the other vendors have nothing to offer. It's because we don't have anything to do with the data. And Cloud Radial is already busy as it is. If I start integrating with every other vendor now, it just gets busier and busier. So this is our answer. By allowing our ecosystem to get opened, by allowing our policies and our assessments to get filled in by third-party data, and by allowing you to notice, again, what the baseline of that data is. Okay, so Hunter sends you a report saying X amount is secure, whatever it may be. Cool. If you put it in context of, is that good enough? Are we aiming for 80%, 90%, 100%, whatever? How off base are we? We now have to-dos. We now have an area to review that. We now have a good partner center, and that's what we're really after. So it's a lofty goal, and I know it's a far-fetched thing to watch me, show you an onboarding thing, but that's our big plan. That also ties into last month's thing on the planner. So if we can do that partner center and we can make our planner better, then really what we're doing is we're saying, automate that stuff, put it in one place, let people see it, and then build a plan for it. And the reason we're doing those two things simultaneously is because if we can do the planner things, open up the quarters, make things shiftable, make things integratable, same thing, open up the APIs, then we have something pretty badass that you can kind of use as a flexible tool. So Cloud Radio becomes much more powerful in the southern hemisphere of features as it is in the northern, which is why I started this showing like, hey, this stuff's cool. This is our bread and butter. We're not touching this. We're not regressing on this, but we need to beef this stuff up pretty hard. We hear our partners that get more serious about this, which is where we're putting a lot of our development time. So hopefully that's a good thing for all of us. Evan, can you launch poll number 2? So that brings me to poll number 2, which I think you already did actually.
So I prematurely launched it, but
Yeah,
people have
let's answer.
already answered. If you guys already, if you haven't seen it, go ahead. The
So
first,
I'll cover that as well. I just want to talk about why poll number 2 has the questions it does. So poll number 2 is both affirmation and just general questions. So are we missing stuff, right? Is there something that we should be doing that we're not doing as far as feature, right? So if you look at the assessment module, and again, based on what I saw, it's like UI, UX, there's some clunk to declunk. Is there a straight up missing thing, right? Aside from the automation stuff, which we know is a thing, that's what I'm after, because I know that when people come to me and saying, hey, look, again, hurts my heart, but I get it. I've had to use XYZ tool because yours isn't cutting it right now. I understand that, right? I understand that you have needs, whatever. Is that just a missing feature thing, or what is that? Because I'm obviously interested with Evan to make sure that gets answered so you can save
absolutely.
money. And I want your money. Can you give me your money, please? Like, that's really what it's about, I think. But other than that, like, that's important. Next, other question on that thing is, what do you want to talk about next? I'll give you a sneak peek of what we're talking about ourselves. This is going to be not next month, but the month after. That's why that question is important. And lastly, I think Evan's just starving. So it's like, what's Evan eating for lunch? Are you going to starve him out? Maybe.
Yeah, it's 1 p.m. almost. I
Oh, poor baby. Oh,
really need some
we'll
food.
wake up from Australia to watch you be hungry.
Is that
No,
what they're doing?
watch the recording. Don't worry. No, nobody does that.
Trickling in still.
This is
And then also, Ricky, I wanted you to showcase this while I read the question out. But basically, because we kind of already do this, but also I can add a little. Any plans in the roadmap to track assessment changes and progress? For example, after onboarding, creating a baseline assessment, then recommending and performing. Basically, can you show them what we do now
sure.
in regards to that?
It's pretty simple, like comparatively to like what you're looking at. I think I did a pretty decent one on the NIST one. So again, it's not going to be exactly what you're asking for, but at least I'll show you exactly what we're trying. Now, the idea is that like with an assessment that you run over time, you have comparisons. So like in my comparison view, what's theoretically happening is, and granted, I did this in a demo thing where it didn't really grow, but you can kind of see what's happening, is day one, day one, day one. Imagine if this was over months, you'd show them the growth over time. And then by doing this, right, this is on an individual on an individual run, it shows the last 4 assessments. And theoretically, what should happen is you should have problems in reds and then turn to greens and turn to more greens and basically tell a story that you are doing stuff over time. Now, what happens is when things change, as I said before, like maybe some of it grows over time. I don't know if I have a good example of this one, but when things change, yeah, like some of these questions maybe didn't even exist. So like you want to be able to track that as well and showcase that things didn't grow. So for right now, this is our solution to that, is tracking that growth over time. This is what you're thinking about, Evan?
Well, yeah, and I wanted to add that the alignment pieces that Ricky's talking about for the future, the idea a lot of it relies on tracking instances of time, not only for assessments but for policies too. So the idea would be where this is going to improve because we're looking to be able to track what you're showing in Cloud Radial over
Mhm.
time.
Even
Yeah,
graphically, like this can be a pretty sexy like line graph and
right.
too. Like we want to be able to show trends over time, saying like, hey, like this has been consistently good. All this stuff's been over. So it's like this is a pretty simple thing of going like, yes, no, cool. But like,
Right. So the answer is yes, we can. Probably not as much of the not the user experience you're specifically looking for right now, but you can technically track the time for now. But we're looking to be more. Again, we're looking to be able to track instances of data throughout Cloud Radial, not just through assessments. So the answer to your question is yes, it's something we're going to look at improving as we flesh out the partner center fully.
and sooner than later, because we've had a lot of mock-ups of our partner center. I hope to show them on an office hours too to get an idea, because that's another one that like, because it is such a major thing and because it isn't just like, we added a cool new dashboard. We're looking at funneling a lot of data. I want more client input than less on that one, because I really don't want to launch something like, what do you think? And you're like, I didn't want that. So it's like, I want to make sure that stuff like that exact question is like, what about this? What about that? Because we know ourselves selfishly, it's like, as much as I love doing cool stuff for your clients, if I do cool stuff for you, you're more likely to use my tool. And I want to be able to show that stuff, right? So one of the big things that Cloud Radial is improving on and investing in is making that data more actionable and viable and usable for the account managers, for the backend people, because if by doing that, it's ultimately going to make the client portal more useful. And if it makes it more useful for you, your clients are probably going to be more likely to use it too. So it's not just about just jamming a bunch of client facing features, which again, one of the big complaints we've had, or not complaints, but concerns is if you add more and more features, more and more stuff to the client portal, clients have less and less tendency to use it because they get overwhelmed. So I think it's high time to take this stuff and do some analytics for you guys, make it more actionable than just a data, vomit. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, I know we're close on time, was this is just the same thing I said from last time, right? As we work on some of these things, we're doing a lot of back-end restructuring, which is why sometimes we have these outages and these double checks, whatever. Like we're revamping permission systems. We're doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes that like isn't terribly sexy and doesn't make its way to a lot of these office hours. But if something's going on and we are working on it, we revert stuff, whatever, just don't forget to check the status at cloudradio.com. You can subscribe to that. It'll let you know if anything's up. And last but not least, this is something that's super cool too. Our CEO, Jeff Ferris, unveiled this at PAX 8. We're doing something else on top of all this, Cloud Radio Storefront. And this is something that we're working on with our good friends at Adaptive Catalog. We'll see if their availability is good, try to have them on the next office hours. I want to talk about what this is, but ultimately this is pretty sweet. This is turning Cloud Radio into a proper storefront where people can order stuff live from distributors. They can get good price. You basically slide your margin on it. It looks really badass. It truly is something that you can plug in and have an Amazon thing. The shipping dates are accurate. The inventory is live and real, and you can get it whenever you feel like it. And your clients can use the portal as a true storefront and a very accurate one. Again, thanks to Adaptive Catalog. So more on that next month. I'm excited to talk about it and probably have Jeff on there as well.
I think Jeff called it the Shopify for MSPs.
Shopify for MSPs. And if you're not familiar with that, I'll say the Amazon for MSPs. But imagine if your stock content was accurate and people could purchase through the portal and stuff too. That'd be neat.
Yeah. I
have no closing remarks. I need a herbal tea for my throat because I monologued the hell out of this one, guys. I really did one on us. I've getting a new computer, I assume, again.
I have no idea what that was at the beginning of this whole thing. I think it could have been because I don't think I had Teams running in the background and I hadn't quit Teams, but do you have Teams running in the background?
Yep.
Wait, yeah. Okay. So I don't know. I always need a new computer. It's just the state I live in.
Evan lives in Florida, which is.
And apparently I'm eating leftovers.
Bummer. I was really hoping for starvation.
I was hoping for surf and turf, but.
Bummer. All right.
Oh, well.
Thank you, guys. If you have anything else that you think of after the fact or whatever, let us know. And for the most part, I will see you on the next one. Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of your days.
Bye.